Hey Red Wing fans, welcome to the Word on Woodward. And this is our annual Steve Yzerman pre-draft press conference presented by Bud Light. My name is Ken Kell, radio voice of the Red Wings, alongside Art Regner. And, you know, we had a 4th of July holiday weekend, Art, and in a lot of ways, this draft coming up on Thursday and Friday is like a holiday for Red Wing fans, isn't it?
Well, certainly. I mean, obviously, Red Wings of the future are going to be drafted as it stands now. The Red Wings have 10 picks in the first round. They're picking 8th overall. By all accounts, because it's such a wide open draft, that everyone thinks that Red Wings are going to get a pretty good player at number 8. Who that player is, Lord only knows. Because the thing that I think we have a tendency to forget, Ken, is that these fellas, and you know how the draft is, they're all down on like the floor of the Molson Center or whatever, the Bell Center. Yeah, the Bell Center. That's what it is. And every team is down there. Well, this is the first time in 3 years everybody in the National Hockey League, a who's who, have all been down together. And once they're together, they can have little separate meetings and give some eye contact. This could be a real free-for-all. We could see a lot of player movement, a lot of trades, a lot of things could happen. So really looking forward to what's about to transpire. It should be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to the draft on Thursday and Friday in Montreal. And, of course, we always look forward to Steve Yzerman, who'll be joining us shortly. Just a reminder, Red Wing fans, you can share your thoughts and reactions with hashtag #DRWDraft, and we'd like to hear from you as well. But Steve Yzerman usually doesn't tip his hand when he goes into the pre-draft, Art, and it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about maybe who they might select. And I really believe that there's a plethora of forwards out there, center icemen and wingers, that he might take a look at.
Well, you would think if you look at it, I mean, the Red Wings, not that they're set prospect-wise on defense, but they're further ahead than they are with their forward core. I mean, it's no secret. They want to shore up that second line. Certainly, the player that they draft 8th overall, unless it turns out to be a Lucas Raymond type player or a Mo Seider who can step in, or given the opportunity to make the team, they actually make it, you know, the first tryout, so to speak, especially in Raymond's case. So this might be somebody down the road in a couple of years, might be fast-tracked. I think it's going to be, if Steve has his druthers, and I have no inside information at all, but I would assume that if the Red Wings are going to pick a forward, it would be a forward that plays center and has some size. I think size is pretty big as well. They want to get a little bit bigger up front.
Well, when you talk about bigger, you got to look at their overall defensemen that they've drafted, and you look at Mo Seider and how big he is, and Simon Edvinsson. Everybody is high on him, and it'll be interesting to see if he can make the club this year. High hopes for Simon Edvinsson, but I think Steve wants to build a bigger team, don't you? And so you have to draft some bigger players up front.
Well, there's no question. When you look at the, certainly Dylan Larkin is not small. He's not a small player at all, but Bertuzzi a little bit on the small side, plays a lot bigger than he does. Fabry's not the biggest guy, but he plays bigger than he does. They do have some size. Rasmussen's a behemoth at, he says, 6'6". Giovanni Smith has some good size, but I think at this point they really are looking for size and skill. They need somebody who can put the puck in the net. All you have to do is look at the playoffs. The forwards that were really successful were guys that were pretty big. Even guys who weren't known for goal-scoring ability, but the way you score goals in the playoffs is those dirty, greasy goals. They got to those hard areas. They were physical. They were able to put the puck in the net. So I would assume, if available, that they would go to they would go forward up front, and a forward with speed and skill and size. And but then again, if a guy like Simon Edvinsson, who fell to them at 6, who knows? One of the top 2 defensemen, if they fall down to 8th overall, the Red Wings, they might be compelled to do that. I mean, you can never have enough defensemen, right, Ken? That's what we've always heard.
Well, you know what? They picked Sebastian Cossa, actually moved up to pick him last year. And the thing about Sebastian Cossa is that we all believe he's the goaltender of the future. Now, we don't know when he's going to be a Red Wing. He still has some work to do. But obviously, I think you still have to draft goaltenders, maybe even in the later rounds, like a lot of teams do, just because the Red Wings really don't have a lot of goaltenders in their system.
No, they don't. I think that that's really a great point. I think that Detroit probably will use one of these 10 picks, and I think they have 3 in the fourth round, pardon me. So maybe in the 4th round they might grab a goaltender. This is not a big market in goaltender. You know, there isn't like a Jesper Wallstedt and a Sebastian Cossa, who were both considered to be first rounders last year. I think if you really look at the draft, the first goaltender is going like in the 3rd round or something in most mocks. So, the Red Wings could find a quality netminder. Probably, I would say, I would look at the 4th round. I don't think they have maybe they don't have a 6th round pick, or it's a 5th round. One of those rounds, 5 or 6, they don't have a pick. So I think before that round happens, and I believe it's the 5th, that you look at it, they will. They may nab a goalie, rather late. Again, in the 3rd round, the three picks in the 4th round. And they have no pick in the 6th round. There you go. I have it written down right here.
Well, it's interesting because in the last couple of years we could probably name 1 through 6 in the draft. This year it's a little bit of a crapshoot just because of the fact that the talent is all mixed up out there, and you don't know what team is going to take what player out there. And I've got players like Matt Savoy, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Marco Kasper, Cutter Gauthier, all could be around where the Red Wings would pick in that 8th spot, depending on who gets picked before them. Are they still going to be on the table?
Well, if they're on the table, all the players that you meant, I would be surprised if it isn't Cutter Gauthier. I mean, Gauthier answers the bell. He scores goals and he plays a rugged game. You know, I like him. I also like his teammate Jimmy Snuggerud, I believe, who also played on the U.S. development team. And, remember a couple of years ago where, I don't know, like 8 guys from the U18 team, from the development team that plays out there in Plymouth, were drafted in the 1st round. There is a wealth of talent, guys that have either played on the U18 team or about to play on the U18 team or still will be on the U18 team. Snuggerud. So there's a lot of good Americans in the 1st round that could be drafted 1 through 32. I kind of like Snuggerud because he, might not be quite as big, but still has the same skill set and almost as big. It still plays a rugged game like Cutter. So, those should be a couple of guys to look at. Matt Savoy is a really intriguing guy, too. The thing about Matt Savoy is he plays center, but everyone projects him maybe to be a winger at the NHL level. He scores a lot of goals, but he's 5'9". I'm not so sure that, Savoy, who's obviously a gifted player, I'm not going to try to take anything away from him. I think that in this case, if it's all equal and the Red Wings are choosing between Savoy at 5'9" and let's say a player that's 6'1", 6'2", and I said pretty much equal skill set, although Savoy's special, I think they'll go with the bigger player. I really do.
The other thing, when you talk about Steve Yzerman, it'll be interesting to see what he has to say in just a few short moments. Again, fans, we will be going to Montreal, where Steve Yzerman will be talking about this year's draft. And you never know what Steve Yzerman are, just because of the fact that sometimes he tends to think outside the box. And if all the players that we mentioned were there, he might go in a different direction.
Well, right, and that's why I look at Jimmy Snuggerud. To be honest with you, he's listed up high in most mock drafts, but I think if you look at it that way, he may, that would be the surprise pick, I think, at 8th overall.
Yeah, and it would be a surprise to a lot of Red Wing fans out there, too. And again, when you look at this year's draft, I see 2 defensemen in the first 10 picks, and the draft is usually, high in defensemen the last couple of years. But the thing is I think there's a lot of forwards that could be taken here.
I would be stunned unless it's. I would be stunned if it's a forward.
All right, let's go to Montreal, and here's Steve Yzerman, Red Wing general manager.
So those are really decisions that I've found have come up on the draft floor, or you touch base with some teams that are near you in the order and before the draft to get a feel if they have any interest one way or the other, and then as your pick is coming up or their pick is coming up, you may get a phone call. But ultimately, those decisions to move on the draft floor happen pretty quickly at the time of the draft.
And secondly, in the last recently, we've had 2 pretty major trades. Both kind of different kinds of trades, but both involve teams that really needed to get their salary cap in order. You have a lot of cap space available. Do you expect to see more of those? And is that something with the cap space you have, you're looking at harder this year than maybe you did previously?
Well, I guess, we're open. We have cap space. I want to try to use it wisely because it can disappear in a hurry. Two ways of potentially using it for us are, maybe you get a player, you look at Tampa's deal with Nashville. Nashville gets a pretty darn good defenseman for, I shouldn't be speaking for these teams, but it was Tampa was in a spot they had to move the contract and weren't really in probably a position to ask a lot in return for Ryan McDonough. But so we're looking, you look at these teams that have to move players to do other things or just to be cap compliant to start the season. In those situations, you look at the player and what impact they're going to have on your team and what they cost, or you look at other deals potentially where you're maybe taking, helping somebody out to alleviate their cap issues. Maybe it's for various reasons, and you're giving it, you're getting an asset. We've done those in the past. Ultimately, I look at both situations if you can, if it's going to make our team better either this season or in the future seasons, if you're able to get something that helps you down the line to do it.
And then finally, I'm sure you've had time now to sort of review the players that may or may not be available at 8. Now that you've had time to kind of sort of look at it, are you, do you think, you're going to get a pretty good player there? Do you feel strongly about that?
Well, we certainly hope so. That's our plan. Ultimately, they're all 17 and 18, and you never really know, but we kind of feel good where we're sitting with what we think might be available. And this whole thing could go a lot of different ways based on, you look at all the public lists and they can vary. So we ultimately, I only know what we're thinking. I don't know what other teams are thinking, but we feel pretty good about where we are, and we think we're going to get a good prospect that will help us.
Thank you, Steve.
Helene St. James.
Hey, Steve, hope you had a good holiday weekend.
Helene, I had a question for you. How come you didn't get the first question today? You always get the first question.
Yeah. Should I just forfeit any question then?
Just curious, just an observation.
Well, I'm glad you're paying attention. My first question is, we've had 2 years of pandemic disrupting leagues and such, but how good do you feel of a handle you and your scouts have on not just the players expected to go in the first round, but deeper into the draft, having seen as much of them as you normally would?
Yes, certainly a little bit more familiarity with all the players. 2 years ago, where March and April is a really important time. We're all excited about the U18s and watching these kids in the playoffs throughout all the junior leagues, and everybody shut down. So we missed an important part of the season 2 years ago. Last year, some of the kids didn't even play. It was really challenging. This year, it was somewhat of a return to normalcy. The Russian players were hard to assess and evaluate because it was difficult early to get in there, and then really early in the season, and then you weren't getting in there at all or going there. So apart from that, it's been, for the most part, a much more normal season this year.
Just follow up on that. Is there any concern about drafting Russians or?
Yeah, I guess so. More so, it's always the usual concerns are there, and throw in, just the uncertainty of what's going on in Russia, and a little bit of uncertainty as to what players can and can't do. Will they be available now or anytime in the future? It adds just another level of uncertainty to the whole, drafting of Russian players and whatnot. But
lastly, your last 3 first picks have come out of Europe, and I know you scout everywhere, but what is the advantage of seeing a 17 or 18-year-old playing in men's leagues as you have with, Sider and Raymond and Atkinson?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure there is an advantage. Ultimately, you go and watch a lot of games. You have to watch them a lot because sometimes they hardly play. I remember, God, what it was 2 years ago, going out, flying to being in Europe and going to watch Lucas Raymond play, and I think he played like 3 minutes in a game, and I flew to the Czech Republic to watch him play in the Champions League game. Yeah, Chris Draper, myself, and Vladdy, and he was a healthy scratch. So it's just if they play a lot in those leagues and do well, just the simplicity of it is, you see a guy playing in a men's league playing a lot. I don't know if they get overvalued or not, but for us, it really has nothing to do with what country or what league they're playing in. I'm not sure there is any advantage to it. We kind of take all those factors in, and you see what they're doing today, and you kind of try to project what they're going to be in the future, and you put them in order. So we don't really look at it as, hey, they were in this league or that league, because what happened last year, the year before, isn't necessarily an indication of what's going to happen in the future.
So if nothing else, at least you get frequent flyer miles, though.
Yeah, we got a few of those.
Thanks, Steve.
Max Boltman.
Hey, Steve, just to follow up about the Russian prospects, like how much is that, how much is that affecting the list for you guys this year? Like, I assume you're not ruling them out entirely, but how much movement do you think, especially on the Russian guys in the first round or two?
Max, I have no idea. We're preparing our lists or organizing our lists as we normally would. And I don't know what other teams are doing, but we'll continue with the same kind of, strategy or same plan that we always have. Ultimately, we want to draft really good prospects and make sure they're, good kids, and go from there.
And then on the Ontario kids, who I guess they probably played less than the others in the previous season, do you view that as more of an issue in terms of what you've seen in terms of being able to evaluate, or is there any concern that they would have just lost development entirely and they may not have a chance to catch it up, basically?
Yeah, well, I think they'll catch up. I truly believe if you're going to make it, you're going to make it. You'll find a way to get there. But I do, sitting and not playing for a year for anybody isn't a good thing. But I do think they'll catch up. But the more you see players, I guess the better you know them, the more familiarity you have with them, you're more comfortable. I think that's just kind of a natural inclination. If you haven't seen them, it's hard to if you haven't seen them, it's hard to project what they're going to be. I guess that's the obvious answer to your question. But I think, again, overall they'll make it if they're good enough and they have the determination to make it. But certainly the fewer viewings you have, the fewer situations that they've played in, whether it be with their team in their league or national teams or even regional teams in some of these other tournaments, which a lot of the kids missed out on. Ultimately, I think it affects their draft order, but I don't think in the long run it affects their ability to, their development to play in the National Hockey League.
And then last thing, where do things stand between you and Dylan Larkin? Have you guys, where in the, negotiation process are you guys at right now?
I'd be happy to answer questions on the draft for you and leave it at that. I have no desire, and I will not have any updates or on contract negotiations on any of our players.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Ansar Khan.
Yeah, Steve, it seems like you've got quite a few defensive prospects that are close to the NHL out of recent second-round picks. Just wondering how you feel about the depth of the forwards in the system, particularly centers. Is that an area that you'd like to kind of bolster, whether it's with the first pick or at some point in the draft?
We won't be making a decision, at least in the first round, based on position. But as we go through it and you go into later rounds, you look at the current draft and you see, if we've drafted 3 defensemen or 3 right shot defensemen or 3 goalies or something. We may be looking at a different position on our list at some point. But again, I just go back to, they're 17 years old, 18 years old. Where they're going to be in 4 or 5 years, we have no idea. So we're going to stick to trying to pick the best prospect available when our pick comes up.
And also, I know you just said that you don't want to discuss player contracts, but does that also include, just wondering, your free agents? Have you made any decisions on Mark Stahl, Sam Gagne?
I've spoken to the majority of our players. A couple I still have to speak with, and ultimately, in general, my message to everybody was, look, I'm going to see if I can improve our team, and I will get back to them closer to July 13th when unrestricted free agency opens. I haven't ruled out bringing anyone back off the top of my head. I can't think of that. I've said that specifically to anyone, and I do have interest in bringing in all of our players, but that'll be determined, a final decision one way or the other, shortly before or shortly after July 13th.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Bob Duff.
Steve, when you're in the market for a coach, does that put a lot of other kind of off-season stuff on hold until you fill that position? Because obviously that's a pretty vital role in the scheme of things.
Certainly is time consuming, unless you'll see in a lot of situations, and that wasn't the case this year, but teams will make a change and announce that they're the replacement immediately. We didn't do that. I took some time to look around, to interview some people, but the process itself is pretty time consuming, and you know what, there's a lot to be done, whether it's preparing for the draft, preparing for free agency, so a lot of other internal things. So it does take time. Does it take you away from other things? It's not really, not necessarily in time, but it's a major focus, as you can imagine. It's an important position, important decision for us. So I took a lot of time with it, and it's on your mind constantly. So yeah, it does take up a lot of time, but that's part of the job. And we got our month of May, June, and early July for a general manager is probably the busiest time of year, because you got a lot of important things happening within the same couple of months.
And you had a lot of your prospects this year, from college to junior to Europe, who played in championships, either won or played in the finals. When a player's developing, how vital is that? Obviously, the player's still got to be a good enough player to make it, but how does something like that not only help them grow, but I imagine it's an advantage to you assessing them too, to see how they respond in such high pressure situations?
Yeah, I just think it's great for their confidence, great for development, playing in playoff series or college hockey, win or go home, those sudden death games. I think they're tremendous experiences, and you build up your nerve, you build up your resolve, and there's a lot to be learned from winning and losing. So I think we're very happy that some of these kids got a chance to go deep into their playoffs, or even win a national championship or a championship in some cases. So again, I think it's great for their confidence as hockey players, but also in their development to be thrown into these situations and have to perform, and win or lose, you're getting a lot out of it.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Ed Colfin.
Hey, Steve, I'm just curious, compared to when you came into the league as a player, how has this draft process changed? Is it much more thorough these days, I would imagine, or what?
Well, going through it as a 17 or 18-year-old, we didn't have the draft combine. We didn't have, we didn't have all the access to social media where you saw these different lists where you were rated and all these reports from people, right or wrong. Those didn't exist. So I really only knew the players that I played against in Ontario. You know, you'd hear a little bit about the other leagues, and maybe you went to I don't even think they played the U18 tournament at that time. You might go to the I did go my draft year to the U20s and saw a couple of kids for the draft, but you had as a player so little information. You had no idea. I didn't have any idea where I stood and what people thought of me as a player, or so on and so forth. So, and I think for teams, we didn't get near the detail of information, or they didn't get it that we're able to get now. The draft combine is very beneficial for us, the ability to do some fitness testing on players and to see them throughout the course of the season. I think you just have way more information on both sides, and in some ways that's good, and in some ways it's not so good. But for the kids, I think again, there's just so much information out there, and in some cases it's great, and for some of them, I think it raises the expectations to an unrealistic level for a lot of kids.
Hey, Steve,
It's hard to make it. You know,
are these
sorry,
kids
it's hard.
better-
It's hard to make it to the NHL, and regardless of where you're drafted, and a lot of times the kids are, come in with based on what they're being told and what they hear, or the expectations are a little out of whack.
Are these kids better, generally speaking, skills wise, Steve? I mean, there's so much individual coaching now in the summer and all that.
Yeah. I'd say overall they're better athletes. They're higher skilled. They're better trained. Yeah, and that would be from top to bottom. Again, we just, I go back. I mean, God, it's a long time ago now. Whatever, for almost 40 years, really. And the education that they have, the information as far as diet, the access to skills, coaches, and the importance put on it, skating instructors and off-season workout programs and things. It's all at a higher level. These kids are better athletes. They're they can do things. We watch these things that they can do with the puck that we wouldn't even have thought of. That's second nature for the kids today. So you're getting a better all-around athlete, a better, more educated, athlete as well, and it's raising the level of play at the NHL to another level. Every generation is getting better and better.
Speaking of some of that stuff, you guys are holding a development camp, right? I don't think you guys have announced it yet.
We are holding a development camp, yeah.
And how important is that for you guys?
Well, we really, for a few reasons, really like it. One, it's an opportunity, a lot like the European kids and the US college kids. That's our only time we have really to spend with them throughout the year. The European kids obviously go home and play in their leagues, and the NCAA kids go to college, and you're limited to your access, or you're limited to your access to them. Therefore, so we get 4 or 5 days, one to spend with them, get to know them, and more so for the younger kids, that maybe haven't been around a college program or a European pro program. They get a chance to come in. We get a chance to spend some time with them. Work with our skating people, our skills people, our fitness people, to really make sure they're on a good program if they're not already for their off season. We talk about strengths and weaknesses, things we really want them to focus on, and then kind of send them on their way for the rest of the summer. And we may not see some of them like in Detroit until the following development camp. So we really like it. Mostly it's a great chance to spend 4 or 5 days with them, and them get to know us, and vice versa.
Hey, last one, just getting all 32 teams on the floor Thursday and Friday. Is that just going to make it more normal than the last couple of years? And then secondly, does that kind of increase the chances of a trade or whatnot, if you think, or what?
No, it has no, I don't think it has any impact on the trade or not. I personally like doing the draft remotely, albeit the second day was kind of a death march for everyone. But I find the draft floor, it's very hectic. The first round in particular, the building is sold out. It moves slower, so it's not as big a deal. but just every, we're all on the floor. We're kind of packed at our table. There's not a lot of room. There's a lot of distractions going on. So I like doing it remotely, actually, and got used to it. We just need to find a way to. There's a lot. I know the league likes to do it in person. I do like being in the same room with our scouts. Last year, we kind of had a war room set up, so to speak, in Detroit, which was better than the previous year. But there's a lot of value in the league coming together for the draft here this year in Montreal. There's a lot of positive in it, but for the actual draft itself, I'd much prefer to be in a quieter environment.
I see. Death March is the perfect word. That was the perfect word. Hey, thanks for this.
Yeah, no problem.
Art Regner.
Hi, Steve. Actually, Ted just kind of asked the question. There is some speculation that because everybody's back together, the old gang is back together on the floor after a 3-year absence, that it could actually be a free-for-all, like a domino effect. You're not getting that kind of feeling at all, that if big trades are being made or players are moved or something, that that it could be, you could be in for quite a eventful 2 days.
Yeah, no, Art, I don't think so. Like, I don't like most guys aren't making trades just to make trades. It's a free for all. You kind of like, I think you can do that anywhere. It doesn't matter. You pick up a phone, texting, like, it's, you pick up the phone, you walk across the room. Geez, half the time you're texting the guy sitting right at the table next to you. You can do that from anywhere. So no, I really, whether we're doing it remotely or doing it live like we are in person this year, I think it has no bearing really on what, you're going to do what you have to do regardless, and you're going to find a partner to make a trade or whatnot. Believe it or not, it's not like we just wander around the room kind of looking for somebody, open up the raincoat and sell them a watch or something like that. It's just, there is a bit of a plan to it all, believe it or not.
Well, yeah, some of the deals you made, I think other GMs might disagree with that analogy when you come calling. But I'm going to give you a hypothetical, although I know you're not probably going to answer it. You're at the 8th pick. You've got 3 positions. Every player grades out. They're exactly the same, razor thin margin. One's a goalie, one's a defenseman, and one's a forward. Would you be inclined to go forward with that pick? They're even.
That's a really good question. I'm trying to answer that without answering it, and I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to answer it. I don't know,
Okay.
honestly. That's a great question, and that could very well come up, honestly. And then I'll answer it after the fact. How's that?
All right, that's a deal. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yep.
Last question, Wojo.
Hey there, Steve. I know you've said before you don't like to get impatient because you feel like when you make kind of a rash move, sometimes you do something stupid. But in your situation with salary cap space and obviously a roster that needs to be upgraded, do you feel like you will have more opportunities, not to do something stupid, but to do something rash, either in free agency or during the draft trade-wise?
Well, again, I look at 2 things. One, how does it? I guess I look at it more than 2 ways. But one, like, we're trying to improve. We want to put, we want our younger players. We want help for, Dylan, Tyler, Philip Hronek. They've been here for a few years now. Dylan and Tyler, particularly. I'm not sure if I'm missing anybody that's been here as long as they have, but we want to surround them with some better players. Continue our, we watched some of the positive impact some of our young guys had this year. We'd like to add to that and continue to move forward. If there's a player that can really make a significant, what we feel would make a very significant impact, sure, we're not afraid to do that in free agency. What, some of the things we weigh on is, okay, like, how much does that player help us today, tomorrow, and 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and what's the cost of acquiring that player? And is the cost of acquiring that player, does it make sense for where we hope to be in 3 or 4 years, or are we just spending a whole lot of money and not going to be much different in 3 or 4 years, whether that player's here or help get us there? And is there a more efficient way to get there at the end of the day? So weigh it all in, and that's for short-term contracts and long-term contracts.
Just one quick follow-up, a kind of a silly question, but maybe not, because most of us don't follow all the European leagues and the Swedish leagues and whatever else, and don't know specifics of these prospects. Is it almost easier being a GM in the NHL that you don't have to deal that much, it doesn't seem, with public pressure of pick this guy, not this guy. He played for this team that we know, not for this team. I don't know, you like, I'm not going to rip you for who you pick because I have no idea who it is. And I'm like most people, I think. How is that as an NHL GM?
Well, I think if you look at our 4 leagues, and I would, because I'm a soccer fan, I might start to include MLS as a in the mix, and I do believe they have a draft of some kind. But the reality, the NFL draft and the NBA draft, because college basketball and college football are followed so closely, the players are kind of household names throughout the draft, and there's a lot more familiarity to it. And I think there is, I don't know, it's all, to me, it's all internal pressure. What our own expectations is, we want to get it right. We want to build a good team. So I want to do well in these drafts. But to your point, with hockey, and I would say baseball a little bit too, like a lot of the players, there's just not as much attention focused on the amateurs leading into the draft. So much uncertainty and that on us. So ultimately, I think in any of the leagues, you're just trying to get it right, and you kind of tune out all the noise, and ultimately make a good decision. Because regardless of what people and we all think of, hey, how do we do on draft night, or why do we pick this guy or that guy? It only matters down the road when are they good players or not, and you don't know that till later on. So you better make you try to make really good decisions, and you try not to be influenced by outside pressures, or and create a bias on a particular player, good or bad, and just stick with it and do it. But I think it has to be, you'd have to talk to the Lions or the Pistons about their GMs, how they feel about it, because there's so much more knowledge of the players. We've seen they've been on national TV. They're stars. We watch March Madness, or you watch the college football at any time. So I think it is a little bit easier for us in that sense. But ultimately, down the road, you better get these picks right because you need them.
So you are planning to draft a good player, is that correct?
I'm drafting a good prospect, hopefully, and hopefully that good prospect turns into a good player.
That's what like all GMs, that's what I figured.
It doesn't get any harder than that. Keep it simple.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Those are all the questions we had today. Thanks everyone for joining us. And Steve, thanks for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all. We'll see you Thursday night.
Always good to hear from Red Wings General Manager Steve Yzerman, and lots of great questions presented to him during that presser, Art, but I have to give you a lot of credit. You had that screwdriver in the paint can, and you were just twisting and twisting it, hoping that he would tell you what player he's going to select, but he never did it.
No, he never did, but he did say it was, a good question, and that it would be a difficult. I threw goalie in there, although they're not going to take a goalie at 8th overall. But just to make it even, goalie, and I didn't even specify forward. I just said forward. I didn't say center, which I would have said. Maybe I should have, in defenseman. And he said it was a good question, and it would be tough, and he was going to answer it without answering it. So he made a deal that he's going to answer it right after they draft that player. So, hey, I tried. I really tried. I would be stunned unless one of the top 2 defensive prospects fall down to them. I would be stunned if they don't go forward. I really would be.
Art, one of the interesting takeaways that I got from Steve talking was the fact that in the first round, they're going for the best player available, which means that if they feel on their draft board that a defenseman, again, is the best player, that they're going to go with a defenseman again, if that's the case. So, what they do in the other rounds, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and find out. But it seems like he said the best player available at pick number 8, unless they trade up.
Well, right, which they could do. I mean, if Slafkovsky goes first, the Slovak forward, and Shane Wright falls, he could be a pretty good second line center in the NHL. Do the Red Wings then try to package the 8th pick, and then they have a lot, 3 in the 4th round, they have a 2nd, they have a 3rd. I mean, they have a lot of picks in the top 100. And so would they try to do something like that and maybe get Shane Wright? Hey, who knows? Maybe they would. But what I really think that they're going to end up doing, and it was interesting, we caught it right at the end there, and I don't know if people that were tuned in, there is, when they were talking about the Russian players, specifically what they were talking about is that some teams, or at least what they believe is some teams are staying away from Russian players because of the situation in the Ukraine and the war that's going on, and that Russian players that played in Russia, that they might back off on those players, but Russian players that have played here in North America, and there are some high-end prospects that have played in North America, that they would look at them. And Steve kind of answered the question saying, we're not one of those teams. We're just putting a draft board. We don't care where they're playing. If they fit our bill, whether they're a Russian player or not, we would take the Russian player. That's what I got out of that. Although there have been some teams that have actually, that's one of the really big stories going on in this draft. In the Red and White Authority, I did a podcast with Craig Button, which is up on our website right now, and all the streaming services you can get, can listen to it. We were talking about that because some teams have really specifically kind of came right out, just like Wimbledon has this year, and said, if you're a Russian player, because of the Ukraine situation, you're falling lower on our board. Does not appear that the Red Wings are one of those teams.
Speaking of Russian players, doesn't it bring back old memories when nobody was drafting Russian players, when Sergei Fedorov was available and some of the other stars that the Red Wings acquired in their draft? And now we're kind of in a similar situation, but a little different circumstance.
Right, exactly. Well, what's interesting is that I can remember, Jimmy tells that great story, was they're sitting there at the draft table, the 4th round comes around, and Fedorov's still available. And at that time, because it was then the Soviet Union, no one knew whether or not, when can he come back to North America and play? So they held off on some of the young Russians, because most Russians like Fetisov and Larionov were like in their 30s when they, when the Russian Hockey Federation allowed them to come over to North America and play in the NHL. So, no one knew Fedorov was going to defect and all that. And they said, hey, Fedorov's still available. And Jimmy says, and they said, not only do we think he's the best player available at this pick, we think he's the best player in the draft. And Jimmy, as he would say, then draft him. And that's exactly what they did. So it looks like Steve has the same philosophy as Jimmy did way back then with Sergei.
Well, Art, I think the Red Wings are in a good situation in the fact that they do have cap space. And Steve Yzerman, in the later rounds, has traded up to get a player. Of course, Sebastian Cossa is one of them. And so there is an opportunity with the cap space that if there is a deal to be made, it wouldn't surprise me if he did make a deal to move up. Does it surprise you?
No, nothing he does surprises me. And, and I had a reason to ask him that question about a free-for-all, because, Ken, when the hockey world all gets together and they all like to, they're jovial men, and they, for the most part, they're men, and they like to, talk and make deals. And, like Steve was saying, he's sitting at the table, and lo and behold, there's, Joe Sakic is giving him the eye, like, hey, come on. And he gets up and they walk off to like a dark corner of the room, and before you know it, Cale Makar's a Red Wing. No wishful thinking on my part, but I'm just saying, that kind of stuff happens. So I'm really eager to see, because there is a domino effect. If something happens out of the ordinary, you could see a lot of teams trying to get in on it. Remember last year with the run on goaltenders? Mm-hmm. Once Grubauer signed and didn't go sign with Colorado and signed with Seattle, bam, before you knew it, goalies were moving right and left. So, this thing could happen. There could be a lot going on these next 2 days, Thursday and Friday, actually even tomorrow, because they're all there right now. So on Wednesday, we could see some player movement. We could see things that we couldn't even speculate about.
Just a couple of quick thoughts before we sign off here. First and foremost, new head coach for the Red Wings, Derek Lalonde. What are your thoughts about Derek, and how can he help this club?
Well, I think, what I really like about him, first and foremost, certainly we all wish Jeff Blashill the best, as we've said on many occasions. Great person, great guy. I think a different voice. I think that, he has a little bit of a biting sense of humor. He seems to be a little bit of a smart aleck, and I think that, when he needs to crack the whip, he's going to be able to crack the whip. And I think that I think it's a good hire. He certainly understands Steve Yzerman type of hockey. Since even though Steve has now been in Detroit back for 3 years, that Tampa Bay team was still essentially a team that that Steve constructed. Their style of play is the Steve Yzerman style of play. So I think it's a pretty good hire. And I think where the Red Wings are at right now, and still a development phase and a rebuilding phase, this could be the best coach. I mean, we could be talking about Derek Lalonde 10 years from now, Ken, when you and I are facing retirement and he's still going strong.
Well, it'll be good to see all these players in the development camp, and it was nice to hear that Steve Yzerman said that they will have a development camp, and I believe it starts next Sunday through Thursday, so that'll be good. The other thing, too, is, and I hate to put you on the spot, but
go right ahead.
I enjoy doing it, but free agency is coming up, too, next week. What will the Red Wings be in the market for as far as free agency in your eyes?
Well, I think, first of all, I think Mark Stahl's coming back. If he wants to, I think the Red Wings are more than comfortable with him. Sam Gagner is a really interesting story. I think, again, I have no information, this is pure speculative on my part. I think they want to shore up that second line. If they can get a second line center and a second line winger in free agency, I think they're going to do it. I don't think Johnny Gaudreau, I think they're not in a position right now. I think Steve feels that they're not in a position right now to sign a guy for like a 6-7 year deal for $8, $9, $10 million, whatever it's going to take. But a mid-level guy, and I know everybody keeps telling me, sign Andrew Kopp. He's from Ann Arbor. He scored a hat trick here when he was still with Winnipeg last year. I mean, he seems to like it here. But I think second line center, I think a defenseman, a veteran defenseman, and I think a second line winger would probably be their top priority.
And they need a goaltender, too. They're going to have to get a free agent goaltender in the market somewhere.
Right. That's going to be interesting. It really seems, it's really strange. Goaltending is a really odd market. I couldn't even tend to speculate who they're going to sign, but they're going to sign an NHL veteran with experience who can help net out.
Well, this is going to be a great week, Red Wing fans, and we're certainly happy that you could tune in for Steve Yzerman's pre-draft press conference. But we have a lot to tell you because it's going to be a busy week for all of us here, Daniela, Carly, Art, myself, and everybody. We have our draft party, which is coming up on Thursday right here at Little Caesars Arena, 6 o'clock. And if you can't make it down, you can catch the stream at 6:30. So we hope that you can come down to Little Caesars Arena. Also coming up on Thursday and Friday, the NHL Draft presented by Bud Light. And we're looking forward to see who the Red Wings will pick in the draft. And also stay tuned, Red Wing fans, to Detroit Red Wings social media for the latest Red Wings draft content. So busy week, Art. I know I'll be seeing a lot of you, and it'll be interesting to see who the next future Red Wings will be down the road.
Ken, I really like your shirt. I really like you. Looking good as always.
You're looking good, too.
Thank you.
Red Wing fans, you're looking good as well. And we'll talk to you a little bit later on this week. Thanks for tuning in to The Word on Woodward.